An augmented sixth chord works the exact same way, but with even more tension by changing it so all four voices resolve by just a half step. By changing just one note in the 7 diminished 7 of 5, in this case A lowered to A flat, we form the interval of an augmented sixth between A flat and F sharp. While seventh intervals, such as in a dominant seventh chord, tend to resolve downward, its enharmonic equivalent, the augmented sixth, tends to resolve upward. This is the heart of what makes an augmented sixth chord work, that this interval resolves outwardly to the root of dominant. While the other voices, again, resolve down by half step. The root of the augmented sixth is always a minor second above the dominant. I'll say that again because it's really important. The root of the augmented sixth chord is always a minor second above the dominant. When we look at this chord on the piano, we can see and hear that it's enharmonically equivalent to a dominant seventh chord, in this case, A flat 7. The important thing to remember is that we don't spell it like a dominant seventh because it's not functioning as a dominant seventh. Since what makes this chord so effective is the contrary movement between the root and the augmented sixth, we want to spell the notes in a way that makes this relationship as clear as possible. This is why you sometimes see odd accidentals, like double sharps and double flats in sheet music. They highlight the harmonic function a note is playing in a particular context. But A flat 7 is the most transparent chord symbol for this augmented sixth chord. Conventionally, there are three slightly varying types of augmented sixth chords, each named for an important country in the history of Western classical music. The one we've looked at so far is known as the German augmented sixth chord. If you wanted to achieve the same effect, but with a lighter, more consonant harmony, then you could choose to omit the fifth of the chord and instead double the third, making it an Italian augmented sixth. Since we omitted the fifth, we would label this an A flat 7, no 5. When working with the Italian augmented sixth, remember to resolve the doubled thirds in opposite directions to avoid issues with parallel octaves. Finally, if you prefer an even richer, more dissonant version, you could lower the fifth of the chord by half step, forming an augmented fourth interval with the root. So, no matter what type, when moving to the dominant, we want each note in the augmented sixth to resolve by step to the closest chord tone. Same with the Italian, making sure our two C's resolve by step in the opposite direction. Notice that with the French augmented sixth, that the lowered fifth, the D, is a common tone with the dominant, a kind of anticipation. Also notice that in all three types, the augmented sixth interval resolves identically to an octave. Also, because this is a predominant chord, remember the root is always a minor second above the dominant, although it's not necessarily always in root position. Also, because this is a predominant chord, remember the root is always a minor second above the dominant, although it's not necessarily always in root position. Because augmented sixths tend to be used at important cadences, both the German and Italian versions often resolve to 1/6/4, which is a common way to prolong the dominant. Here's an example from one of my favorite pieces, Mozart's Magic Flute Overture, where we find an Italian augmented sixth in the key of E flat. As a minor second above the dominant, spelled correctly, this chord is a C flat 7, no 5. Notice the contrary motion from the minor sixth to the augmented sixth, then to the octave. Also, see how the doubled third resolves by step in contrary motion. In C sharp minor. Take a minute and see if you can identify where and what type of augmented sixth appears in the opening to this nocturne. And here's the analysis, where we see in the last two chords a German augmented sixth resolving to a 5, which in C sharp minor is A7 resolving to G sharp major. Notice the outward movement of the augmented sixth interval between the A and the F double sharp, which is, again, spelled correctly as an augmented sixth interval, while the other two voices resolve downward by step.
scale degree 2, or Ra in solfege, is a tendency tone that wants to resolve down to scale degree 1. If you're moving directly to 5 from flat 2, the voice with scale degree 2, or Ra, should always resolve down to sharp scale degree 7, or T. Moving to natural 2 would go against this downward tendency and may not be as convincing in part writing. Occasionally you'll pass through cadential 6-4, making the voice leading Ra, Do, Ti for even smoother voice leading. It's important to note that the third of the chord has been doubled in this part writing example. It's best to double tones that have not been altered whenever possible. In other words, it's, in this case, best to double Fa, or the third of the chord. In addition, lowered scale degree 2, or Ra, is a tendency tone, just like our leading tone. It should not be doubled whenever possible. Now it's your turn.